At 76 years old and with a patch of silver hair, Bangladesh's former Prime Minister is a political phenomenon who has guided the rise of her nation of 170 million people from being a back-of-the-beyond rustic jute producer into Asia's fastest expanding economy over the last decade and a half. In office, uninterrupted since 2009, she was the world's longest-serving female head of government. To her credit, Sheikh Hasina has dealt with both resurgent Islamists and keeping them at bay, and at the same time keeping a check on the army, which from time to time has initiated martial law. That is until this week. Months of student protests over controversial quotas within government jobs led to large-scale protests both in July as well as in August, cumulatively killing more than 300 people in excessive police action. But undoubtedly, Bangladesh had taken an authoritarian turn under Sheikh Hasina's Awami League. The last two elections, including the latest one which happened just earlier this year, were condemned by the United States, the European Union and other countries for significant irregularities. There were allegations of stuffed ballot boxes and thousands of ghost voters. Sheikh Hasina won both elections with more than 80% of the vote. Her main opponent, Khaleda, the two-time former Prime Minister and the leader of the main opposition party, the BNP, is gravely ill and has been under house arrest for the last many years on dubious corruption charges. Meanwhile, BNP workers have been hit by a staggering 4 million legal cases, while independent journalists and civil society members also complain of vindictive harassment. Bangladesh may be a small country, but it matters. It is the largest single contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping force. It regularly joins exercises with neighboring countries like India and the United States in the Indo-Pacific. Its vibrant diaspora is intrinsic to business. They send back home about $25 billion as remittances every single year. The United States is still the biggest source of foreign direct investment into Bangladesh and the top destination for Bangladeshi exports. Sheikh Hasina has proven herself to be useful to the West, not least for taking in about 1 million-odd Rohingya refugees from neighboring Myanmar when the crisis initially began. But of late, in the last year or so, the Americans in particular were cut up with Sheikh Hasina and her rather authoritarian ways. She clamped down on her political opponents as well as civil society alike. Washington has been for some time concerned about Bangladesh's drift towards despotism. Hasina was not invited to the last two America-hosted Summit for Democracy gatherings, and in May the country unveiled visa restrictions on any Bangladeshi who was found to have undermined the elections. In response, Hasina told Parliament that the United States was trying to eliminate democracy by engineering her ouster. Now, many are saying her words have come true. She even said at one point of time that the United States was antagonistic to her because she had refused to allow America to put up a military base in her country. That is a charge that the United States has flatly denied. But at a time when the US is desperate to counter China's growing regional footprint at every turn, the rather strident manner in which American policy was pushing Sheikh Hasina and her government, that seems to have backfired, at least to some extent. The United States seems to have made Bangladesh in the last year and a half, almost like a test case for its democracy promotion policy overseas. And that could have dangerous domestic as well as overseas implications. Bangladesh is a crucible which mixes a Muslim population which is bigger than any country in the Middle East. It also has a significant proportion of minorities, about 10% of whom are Hindus, Buddhists, Christians and others. Although constitutionally it's a secular country, a military dictator back in 1988 made Islam the state religion. And that has created a paradox which has proven to be fertile ground for radical Islamist fundamentalists. Sheikh Hasina's economic achievements are rather impressive. Bangladesh has gone from struggling to feed its people to a food exporting powerhouse. When she came to power in her second term in 2008, Bangladesh's GDP was about $70-odd billion. Today, it is in excess of $450 billion, making it South Asia's second largest economy after India. Social indicators have also improved, with 98% of Bangladeshi girls today receiving some form of primary education. Bangladesh is moving into high-tech manufacturing, allowing international firms like Samsung to extricate supply chains away from China. Bangladesh also sits at the forefront of the climate crisis. The nation has had water that has dictated life for tens of thousands of years, from inland snowmelt from the towering Himalayas, which funnel a mind-boggling 165 trillion gallons of water every year through Bangladesh's rivers. From the skies, regular cyclones batter this low-lying delta. It is 80% floodplains, and every single year it causes about $1 billion of damage. Hasina has championed demands for the developed countries to provide their developing peers with $100 billion annually until 2025 for climate resilience. That is a pledge of money that has so far remained unfulfilled. If Bangladeshi life is ruled by water, then its politics is awash in blood. For the last half a century, two families and the two women who lead those families have been locked in a bitter political feud. On the one side is Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, otherwise known as Sheikh Mujib or Bangabandhu, who is Bangladesh's first prime minister. He was assassinated in an army coup in 1975 alongside 17 of his close relatives. Sheikh Hasina was likely the only person who survived because she was not in the country at the time. On the other side is Begum Khaleda Zia, who is the widow of former army chief and the founder of the main opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Ziaur Rahman. General Zia led the country from Mujib's assassination in 1975 until he himself got assassinated in 1981. Both these dynastic matriarchs draw legitimacy from their respective families and their role in Bangladesh's liberation struggle. Hasina derides the BNP as a terrorist party, a party that never believed in democracy, stressing the creation of the BNP itself by a former military general. After her father's murder, Hasina and her sister took refuge in the home of Bangladesh's ambassador to West Germany before eventually being granted political asylum in India. In 1967, she married physicist M.A. Wazid, and the pair have had two children before scientist Wazid died in 2009. Hasina was only permitted to return to Bangladesh in 1981 when she was mobbed by thousands of Awami League supporters and spent the following years agitating for popular elections and the end of military rule. She first came to power in 1996. For the next decade, power in Dhaka alternated between her and Khaleda Zia until 2009, from when Sheikh Hasina started an uninterrupted 15-year reign of power. But much can change over 4 decades, and today Bangladesh's opposition complains of being unable to campaign out on the street or express themselves in the media without fear of arrest. But there is a bigger concern. In 2016, Dhaka saw the worst terror attack on its soil in a cafe which was often frequented by foreign tourists. That led to a spike in ISIS-inspired Islamic terrorism that besieged Bangladesh. There were more than 30 violent attacks just in the 6 months after the Dhaka cafe attack. Hindu academics, secular writers, bloggers were all targeted for the next 6 months to a year. The atmosphere of fear became so pervasive that many restaurants in Dhaka banned foreign customers lest they become another target. But it's not just rocks and sticks on the street. Bangladesh's judicial institutions have increasingly targeted any criticism of Hasina or her political problems. In September of last year, 2 prominent human rights activists who tracked extrajudicial killings and disappearances were sentenced to 2 years in prison on rather frivolous charges. That prompted an outcry from foreign governments. Journalists, cartoonists, and students have also been targeted. Back in August, more than 170 global leaders and Nobel laureates, including Barack Obama, penned an open letter urging Sheikh Hasina to end the continuous judicial harassment of Bangladesh's 2006 Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, who pioneered poverty-reducing microcredit. Hasina has pursued 174 charges, including labor law violations, corruption, and money laundering against Yunus. She describes Yunus as a bloodsucker. Hostage to its size and its geography, Bangladesh has artfully balanced its ties with the United States, along with ties with neighboring India and China, and even with Russia. Dhaka has a significant history of people-to-people contact dating back to the Cold War with India as well as with China and their respective institutions who have hosted Bangladeshi students in civil society. The risk is that pressing too hard pushes Dhaka away from Washington and Delhi and closer to both Beijing and Moscow. Hasina has been singularly standing between Beijing and its long-held ambition to acquire a stake in the Chittagong port. China wants to add this mid-sized port in Bangladesh to its One Belt, One Road initiative. It is seen as a key driver of Chinese commerce into South Asia, and Hasina has been standing in the way. But with her gone now, both China and to some extent Pakistan will play a larger role in the island nation. And that means bad news both for America and for India.